Hello, Year 9. We're going to add on another layer to our equation solving. Go ahead and set up your paper with the proper title. And our first question is, notice how many terms have pronumerals. So, if you, and my pronumerals is spelled, let's check that. Pronumerals, there we go. So, if you guys were actually beginning to look at an equation, for example, 5x plus 3 equals 2 plus 2x. Notice how many terms actually have a pronumeral. So we now have 5x has a pronumeral and 2x has a pronumeral. However, I do not want to have two separate terms with pronumerals because I want to figure out what x is, which means I want the x to be by itself. So if I have my x in two different locations, I'm not really sure what to do with my x's in two different locations. So I'd like to put them in one location. So getting into our first example, in order for me to get my x's in one location, again, I have to be able to recognize that I actually have two separate locations where my x's are. If I don't recognize that, I might start to solve this equation like I would any others, and I would run into mistakes because I would need to figure out what happens to my x's along the way. So in order for me to get to my x's in one location, notice that this is one term. So 5x is a term on its own. If I want to move the 5x to be with the 7x, it's a positive 5x, so I can subtract it from both sides. So I can actually subtract 5x as one of my steps. If I do that, I'm not going to have a 5x left on the right-hand side of my equation anymore. I will wind up having just the 8 left over on the right-hand side. But then that also means that I need to now think about the left-hand side. So if I subtract 7x minus 5x, I'm going to wind up with 2x on the left-hand side. So remember that this minus 5x, I actually wind up subtracting from the right-hand side and the left-hand side. So it's almost as if I could write it right underneath both sides, and I'll figure out what I have left over. But notice that once I do that, I now have an equation that I'm really comfortable solving, because we've been doing this for the last several days. Now I still want to know what x is, and I have a coefficient. So remember how we get rid of coefficients? We divide by the coefficient, and that will get rid of that 2 for me, because they'll cancel out and make 1. So I have x is equal to, and then 8 divided by 2 gives me 4. So I'm able to solve it once I get it to that stage. I just needed to know what to do with the two terms that actually have pronumerals in them. So let's try one more example where I have two pronumerals in my equation. Notice that I have a 5x and I have a 4x in the second example. I have to be able to recognize that I have two terms with pronumerals before I can begin. The other item to recognize is that they're on different sides of the equal sign. So my equal sign is in between them, which is why I have to do the opposite operation to move it to the other side. So I'm going to decide this time to move, I'll still move the 4x over to the left. So to do that, it's a positive 4x, so I'm going to subtract 4x from both sides of my equation. So again, think of it in your head, we're really doing 4x minus 4x, and that'll make 0. And then we're also going to do 5x minus 4x. In order for us to write our next line of work, I now only have a 5 left on the right-hand side, and 5x minus 4x is x, and then I'm going to bring down anything that I have left over, like the minus 3. Now again, this feels really familiar to me, because I know how to solve it now once the x's are together. So if I have a minus 3, I'm going to add 3 to both sides in order for me to get rid of my minus 3. Because minus 3 plus 3 makes 0. So now I only have x left. And then 5 plus 3 gives me 8. So my final answer would wind up being 8 for that example. So let's just recap what we just did. First, we have to identify that you actually have terms with an x, and for these examples, we actually have more than one term with an x. We then have to move the like terms, so the x's, or the values that don't have x's, your constants, to be on one side together. And then we'll need to combine like terms if we can and try to solve for x. So notice those are our 3 steps when we begin any kind of equation that has more than one term with a pronumeral in it. So I'm going to work through these next 2 examples, and it would definitely benefit you to try them on your own and then push pause and see if you agree with what I did. So for 5x and 4x, I want to move the 4x. So let me move the 4x this time to the left. So I'm going to subtract 4x again. And I'm going to wind up with just the 5 on the right-hand side because I got rid of the 4x. And then 5x minus 4x is just 1x. And then I'm going to bring down the minus 3. Now I know to get rid of the minus 3, I'm going to plus 3. That will get rid of the minus 3 for me. And then x is going to be 8. So that was actually the same as the last question. Good chance to try it again. And last but not least, on this question, I have 4m, but it's actually a negative 4m. Always include the sign in front of the number. And you have a 3m. I actually think it'll be easier for me to move the 4m over to the right-hand side. So if I do that, the opposite of minus 4m is to add 4m, because I want to move the entire term. So negative 4m plus 4m is really what we're doing in our head. That will make 0. And then if I add 4m to the 3m, I'll wind up with 7m. I'm going to bring down the 24, and I'm going to bring down the 3 that I had left over. At this stage, if it's more familiar to you to rewrite your equation, you can rewrite your equation as 7m plus 24 equals 3. So I can rewrite my equation and then work from there if that feels a little bit better. Okay? And I really should have my equations lined up, so I'm just going to move it over. 7m plus 24 equals 3. So now I know that in order to solve for m, I'm going to subtract the 24 to get rid of that plus 24. 7m is left over, and 3 minus 24 gives you negative 21. Last step, to get rid of the 7, which is a coefficient. Remember, to get rid of a coefficient, we divide. So we have m is equal to negative 3. And that got rid of my 7 for me. All right? So try both of those, check them with the video, and see how you guys do. I'll see you guys in class.